Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward, and this is Face to Face. Our guest this week is the First Nation sensation, pro wrestler Wavell Starr. Starr is a member of the Star Blanket First Nation in Saskatchewan. He has held numerous titles, including the Canadian Wrestling Federation's Heavyweight Championship. Wavell, thanks so much for being with us this week. Super excited to have a pro wrestler on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Coming here from Treaty 4 territory, Regina, Saskatchewan.
Nice. I'm sure, like myself, many of us grew up, watching wrestling. What were some of your earliest memories of wrestling?
Going to Stampede Wrestling at the Regina Exhibition Auditorium with my cookum and my mushum and my dad, and I remember it was really a family affair. And I remember going to the very first show that I saw, and I was just absolutely fascinated and captivated with all aspects, not only with what was happening like in the ring, but also fascinated with what was happening behind the scenes and just with the business as a whole. So that's how I got interested in wrestling. Basically spent my childhood watching Stampede Wrestling and then watching a lot of those heroes move on to what was then called the World Wrestling Federation, and from then on just always been a fan. And eventually when I became old enough and I was done with my football career, transitioned over to pro wrestling, and it's been a wild journey ever since.
I'm sure for a lot of us, especially on the prairies, Stampede Wrestling was really a big thing. Who were some of the wrestlers back then that really excited you?
Always the Dynamite Kid and Davey Boy Smith, of course, the British Bulldogs. They went on to be huge stars in the WWF, and actually the British Bulldog was just inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame just this past few weeks ago here at WrestleMania Hall of Fame. So they were really big heroes of mine. Also, all of the Hart brothers. So there was Bret the Hitman Hart, as what he became eventually known as. And then there was, of course, Bruce, Keith, and eventually Owen. And Owen, I think, like a lot of other people my age, was kind of the one that we all really looked up to, because he really had that innovative, high-flying style. And we all we knew right away when he went to the WWF as a Blue Blazer, because we recognized him from the tights that he was wearing. They were Stampede-style tights with the lightning bolts on the legs and the stars on the back. So for all of us, it was really great watching these guys wrestle in really, really small towns and small arenas, and then eventually moving up to the grander stages.
I just watched the Owen Hart episode of Dark Side of the Ring last night. He was quite a guy. When did you know that professional wrestling was something that you wanted to get into? Was it when you were with your mushroom and cookum there, and that when you were a young age, or take you a little longer?
Yeah, when I was young, I did know, because at the time I lived in Saskatoon, and in our basement, I was able to kind of MacGyver up a little bit of a wrestling ring using bungee cords, and I was small enough that I was able to actually run off there and hit the ropes. And I remember I would always wrestle with my stuffed animals, and you know what? One of the things that I do remember as a child when I was doing that is that I felt really natural. I felt like I really knew what I was doing when I was wrestling with Dumbo, the various stuffed animals that I was wrestling with. So yeah, when I was a kid, I definitely knew that it was something that I wanted to try. Then once I was done with my football career and there was an opportunity to get into it, then I definitely just went ahead and started getting right into it, and it's been fun ever since.
Being a football player at the university level, you got to have some pretty good training. But when you transitioned over to wrestling, did that take on a whole new type of training for you?
Yeah, it was definitely a whole new type of training, but one of the things that really helped me was that competitive sports experience, high-level sports experience, and of course the element of physical contact that I had from playing with the Regina Rams. So I really had that going for me, where I feel like a lot of the other people that came in to wrestle kind of off the street maybe didn't quite have that same athletic background that I had. So I had that right off the bat, and of course also something that I feel that might have helped me and might have benefited me right off the bat was that I had a gimmick. in the sense that, I was not just a wrestler, I was the First Nation sensation. So basically going out there and wrestling with a character that has been long around the business, and just an opportunity to try and take my shot at it and portray it and update it to the ways that I wanted to do it, in the ways that I interpreted it.
You know, we mentioned the Hart family, who are certainly legends, not only in the ring but outside of the ring as trainers as well. You trained with some of the Hart family, did you not?
Yes, like a lot of other people, I started off just by hanging around the rings here in Regina, and a lot of the boys just kind of taught me this and taught me that. But eventually, one of the local influential promoters by the name of Bob Leonard was connected with Stampede Wrestling. So he was involved in those shows, so he had put in a word for me with Bruce Hart at Stampede Wrestling, and from there I was able to move on to the Stampede style training, and that was really where I felt that I knew that I'd found my path, and that this was, I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. It was very hard work. Those workouts in Stu's Dungeon are nothing short of exactly what you hear of in a lot of the books and stories that you hear about it. But I'm really, really proud and glad to say that I went through that and can say that it's on, it's on my resume during that time, because of course since then the school at Stu's house it's not there anymore. So I feel really glad that I got to be a really important piece of that history.
I'm trying to remember back to Wrestling with Shadows, that Bret Hart documentary. It's called The Dungeon, isn't it? Or was called The Dungeon?
Yes. Yes, yeah, it's called The Dungeon, and there's no, like when you watch wrestling on TV, like they're wrestling in a ring, so they're doing stuff off of ropes, and there's a lot of room outside of the ropes, so there's a lot of oxygen, whereas when you're in the dungeon, there's no wood on the floor. Like this is like just wrestling mats, so you're learning how to land on your back they're just wrestling mats, and it's got a low roof, and it's small and closed in with one window, so there's not a lot of oxygen, and those practices, no matter how fit you were, Bruce would take you to the very limit. So whether you blew up after 30 seconds or 2 minutes, he would force you to go however long it takes to get you to that point. So you may as well go 110% right off the bat and get to that point of exhaustion, because the longer you pace it and hold out, well, the longer you're gonna have to be in there. So those were some of the hard lessons. And also he had this treadmill. He had this old treadmill that we used to have to do sprints on in the back, and those were hell. And I do actually remember seeing people actually vomit after running on those a session on the treadmill.
Nice. So how did your very first match come about, and how did that go?
Well, it's really interesting because honestly, my very first match, I didn't really want to go with anything that would give my identity away too much, because I wasn't sure if I was going to be very good at it at all. So if I was not going to be any good, I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to misrepresent my family or any band members from Star Blanket or any other Indigenous people. So right off the bat, when they asked me what I came up with the name. I just said, call me Donnie Mac, and that name was just kind of neutral, and I picked a place, Minneapolis, Minnesota. And it was just, so I could be just a generic wrestling guy right off the bat. Fortunately for me, after those first couple of matches, I did feel that I was on the right path, and decided to start using my real identity after those first two initial matches. So I'm no longer from Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Well, as you mentioned, you have a gimmick. With so many wrestlers, almost every wrestler's got a gimmick. How did you settle on yours?
Well, honestly, the way it is, you're kind of born right into it, right? And that's the way it is with wrestling, and that's kind of the history that goes with it. So if you have, if you're missing a finger, you're forever going to be the 9-fingered wrestler. Right. And that's just the way it is. So I accepted that right off the bat, and I was ready for it. I did have a few different approaches that I was concerned with, right? Because I didn't know. I didn't want to come across as being overly romantic. I didn't want to be, too many feathers and too many dancing and the cowboy Cowboys and Indians thing. I wanted to somehow portray the Indigenous image and some of the positive aspects about it. Like, for instance, the trunks that I wore, those were made by my mother, and she has a long history of being a seamstress. She made powwow outfits, so she knows what she was doing, and I was able to come up with some really nice looking gear. And then also when I was in OVW, so this is the clip that we're looking at right now. This is in Louisville. That was the WWE developmental at the time. They wanted Jim Cornette at the time he had approached me and said we were ready to put me on TV and give me a little bit of a push. What do we want to use for a name? He didn't want to use Wavell Starr. So we actually went with what is, very, very close to my actual traditional name. And we went with Standing Thunder. And I'm pretty proud of that time when I was down there. It was one of the best times of my life, also one of the hardest working times of my life. But if I could do it all over again, I wouldn't change a thing.
Love Jim Cornette. We got much more to talk about here, Wavell. We're just going to step aside for a quick break, and then we'll continue the conversation here on Face to Face with pro wrestler, the First Nation sensation, Wavell Starr. Stick around. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is pro wrestler Wavell Starr. Wavell, you realized your dream of making it into what is now the WWE. How did that all come about?
Well, I always had that dream to actually just be a professional wrestler. But once I got into the business, I think it's always been, my motivation to be best that I can and compete at the highest level. So automatically my goal was to wrestle in a WWE ring. So that took a little bit of work, right? I had to go and get trained and get the proper credentials and references that I could have behind my name. And eventually there was a cold call for a WWE tryout through Ohio Valley Wrestling, which was operating out of Louisville, Kentucky. So I sent in my package like thousands of other people did, and I got a call back from Jim Cornette. Ended up going down to the training camp, the tryout camp, and did really well. So out of the hundreds of people that the thousands of people that applied and the 100 or so that came to the camp, there was a handful of us that were invited back to participate with the WWE developmental class. So I took advantage of that and moved down and spent a long period of time, longer than 8, 9, 10 months, something like that, in Louisville, Kentucky, really trying my best to, improve and learn a little bit about the WWE system. And then after a little bit of experience and networking and making a few contacts, I eventually was booked for my very first WWE match, which happened in Calgary, Alberta. And after that, I was brought back several times for the WWE TV tapings. We would do the Raw on a Monday and the SmackDown on a Tuesday. So I over the years, I did have the opportunity to have several WWE matches and that experience that no one can ever take away from me. So I'm pretty proud of that.
As you should be. What were some of the names that you worked with?
Well, right off the bat, when I was in Ohio Valley Wrestling, the tag team champions were from Quebec. They were called La Resistance. So that was Rene Dupree and Sylvain Grenier. So they were on Raw as the WWE Tag Team Champs. And on my very first match in Louisville, on my very first day, actually, I showed up. Nobody knew who I was. All of a sudden, they saw that I was on a TV match, which didn't happen a lot. Most people had to come there and wait months before they even get on TV. I came there right off the bat in my very first match. And I think everybody thought that I was going to go out there and just get squashed by Rene Dupree. But in my very first match, Jimmy liked me and he wanted to give me an opportunity. So luckily for me, Rene was a very nice guy. He turned out to be a friend. He kind of helped me out during that time. And I guess most importantly, on that very first night, I pinned him 1, 2, 3 cleanly in the middle of the ring. And that was just as a fresh Indigenous Cree Dakota guy coming from Regina to Louisville, Kentucky, to take a run at the big shots, right? So that really stands out to me, and I really think back of my time there, and I'm very thankful to Rene Dupree for doing that for me, because I realized at the time he was a big name. He was a household name all over the place. He was on TV every Monday, and I was coming out of nowhere. And I'm really grateful for that, because that really set off a lot of really good positive things for me in my career after that.
You never did end up with a full contract from the WWE, and from what I've read and heard, that kind of had to do somewhat with your gimmick and somebody else having that gimmick. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, honestly, it's really hard to say. The answer really is like, we don't have anything for you, which basically means it could be anything, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, so I think a lot of people kind of try to insinuate that perhaps that the signing of Tatanka to the WWE at that time probably was them choosing to go ahead and revive the gimmick, but just to use it with someone that the people were already familiar with. So whether or not that was the case, I can't confirm. But I will confirm that I never actually did get that full-time opportunity, to put ink to paper. Having said that, I do believe that everything happens for a reason. And early on in my journey, in my quest to make it to the WWE, I did, go do some consulting with some elders and, some ceremonies. And I do believe that everything happens for a reason. And I'm very, very proud of the time that I spent there. And I try to do the best that I can to portray positive, enthusiastic, role model messaging to Indigenous youth, because I've really gotten to see a lot of aspects of the world that I never would have gotten to see had I not been involved with professional wrestling. And I realize that is, talent given God-given talent, and I'm very thankful for it.
You did a lot of shows in Northern First Nations, in Manitoba, and other places. What were those shows like?
Well, those shows are always fun because generally they're not. You don't have to go out there and jump off of a ladder to make them to entertain them, right? A lot of them really appreciate what we're doing as an art, so we go out there and of course a lot of them, they don't have a lot of entertainment, or maybe we're the only show in town. But on the best case scenario, we might have 500 people in a hockey rink or a school gym, and when you're out there, that makes it really easy to work a match, because your adrenaline just flows the louder that the crowd is and the more involved that they are. So always have a great opportunity. And again, I always thought it was great to go out there and meet more people. I especially like to go to the communities to see where the youth still speak Cree, because here in the South, the Treaty 4 area, I think the generation ahead of us through the residential school, through that whole legacy, kind of lost their language a little earlier. So it's very fascinating for me when I go up to these northern communities and you see youth from the high schools and the elementary schools that can still speak their language. So for that feeds me as well. It makes me feel positive, and it's one of the small benefits that you get. So no, it's not like being at WrestleMania or WWE Raw, but it's something else, and I appreciate that as an Indigenous person, because it's an opportunity to help and to give back.
Yeah, there's entire tours, wrestling tours, or used to be, of Northern First Nations in Canada. What do you, we know it's big among First Nations. What is the representation of Indigenous people like, though, in wrestling?
Well, there seems to be a little bit more now as time goes on, but when I first got involved, there wasn't a lot. I met early in my career, there was Mel McGee, a very good friend of mine that turned into a mentor. We unfortunately lost him a couple of years back, but he was a great guy, a very close friend. He was from the George Gordon First Nation, and a can't miss prospect for the WCW, and some political stuff happened, and he didn't, same with him, political stuff happened or whatever, and he didn't get ink to paper, and then he became a father. And once he became a father, everything changed. And it was that moment, he explained that to me, that how much that impacts your life. And several years later, I saw that from, when I had the birth of my child, my son, Cage, because I was on WWE TV 6 days before he was born. So he was really born into the world when I was 100% focused on making it to the WWE. And then as the years went on, you get more and more committed to fatherhood and being a hockey dad, and realizing that maybe things do actually happen for a reason. And I didn't have to miss out on those early years of being there for hockey practice and those types of things, which I do know that a lot of my friends that went through that, they did have to miss out on a lot of things. There's a lot of sacrifice involved. So I do feel blessed in that sense.
Pretty great career indeed. Wavell, we more to talk about here. We just got to step aside for one more quick break, and then we'll continue the conversation here with pro wrestler Wavell Starr. Stay with us. Welcome back to Face to Face. Our guest this week is the First Nation sensation, Wavell Starr. Wavell, you've kind of transitioned from inside the ring to more of, helping train the up-and-coming. Can you talk about that move for you?
Yeah, that's honestly that's a little bit of a natural transition in the business. We have something that's called a bump card, which basically means you've got a card that has a certain number of times on it that you can land on your back, and once you run out, you can't reload the card. That's it, you're done. And I am definitely running close to the end of that bump card. So I do like to stay involved, and I do right now. I'm more into the promoting of shows and bringing events to Indigenous communities and other events like that. But as my son gets older, if he makes a decision to train, then I am 100% going to be making sure that he has a safe place to learn the craft and a place where he can develop right off the bat, with a good ring and with proper training. And so with that, I would look to get a class of students right here in Regina and start them right from the ground zero. And basically, there's a lot of my colleagues and other wrestlers that are around Regina that I would certainly engage to help me with the project. But moving forward, of course, right now there's not a lot happening in terms of live events or even training. But I certainly have been doing some a little bit of research behind the scenes and kind of looking to that next step in my career.
Yeah, Wavell, we're running short on time, but we talk about these venues and how important they are, these small places. What has the pandemic really done to more of an amateur wrestling and the whole scene here?
Well, in terms of independent wrestling, it's pretty much put it at a halt. There was a time for a little bit where they had some shows with several restrictions in place. So, I mean, it was fine in the sense that it was good for people to get out of the house and do something, and for the talent to get in the ring and have a match and practice. But really, it wasn't the same, right? Because if you're looking at 25% capacity or whatever it was, it doesn't have that same impact. It doesn't have that same thing. Even as a performer, having to perform in front of, say, a camera rather than a live audience, there's a huge difference. So there really hasn't been a lot. So the independent wrestling business has been impacted quite a bit. But I do believe that once things get going, once everybody's been vaccinated and the time runs its course, that there is going to be a market for live shows. I have heard a buzz, and a lot of people have heard rumors that WWE may not be doing live events anymore, which would offer a little bit of an opportunity for other organizations to kind of fill that gap for people who do like to, pick up a bag of popcorn and a bottle of pop and watch some wrestling.
Well, we hope it returns soon, like everything else. Wavell, really appreciate you taking the time to be with us this week on the episode. Wish we could have done it somewhere in a ring with you. My editor, Wilf, said he was ready to give you a body slam. So that is...
Thank you so much for having me on. I totally appreciate it.
You bet. That is all the time we have for this week. You can visit our website, aptnnews.ca, for past episodes and find the podcast on aptnnews.ca/face-to-face podcast. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great night. We'll see you next week.